So how do you program a computer to drive a car? Now, one interesting thing to note is that I'm going to posit that any animal can drive a car. Now, what do I mean by that? Any animal is capable of navigating through its environment without running into things. And that is all you need to be able to do to drive a car, right? You need to be able to drive through the environment without running into things. So now, any animal can't drive a car because it can't learn the controls. Only humans can drive a car because we can learn the controls. But conceptually, any animal can because it can navigate through the environment. So, why is it so hard to navigate through the environment? Well, I think we have to look at, well, how does an animal do it? An animal doesn't need to understand different objects. It doesn't need to understand that a person is a person, a tree is a tree, and or that a car is a car. All it needs to understand is that this is in the way and this is not in the way. And that's all it needs to be able to understand. And it seems like all the other approaches are they try to bring it back to recognizing what a person is and what a car is and what a tree is and all of these other things. And I understand why, because each of these have different ways they can move. You need to be able to predict their movement. That's another thing. You have to be able to predict the movement of objects, which is very tricky. But you don't need to be able to understand that a tree is a tree and that a person is a person. Take this edge case, for example. Imagine a person on the sidewalk dancing. Now, in my theory of how to drive a car, this would be no different than a tree on the sidewalk blowing in the breeze. They would have the same qualification that it's something that's standing still, but it's moving, but it's not going to run into you. So you have to drive around it, but you don't have to like measure its trajectory and predict its trajectory because the person dancing is going to be somewhat stationary. You still have to be weary of them if they make a dance move and start to come out towards the road. But just like the tree, it's the same thing with the tree. If the tree is blowing in the breeze and then suddenly it breaks off and now it comes into the road, well, now you've got to avoid it. So they're actually the same problem. Okay. So then how would you be able to recognize this? So instead of understanding every single type of object and having a database of them and recognizing the objects, you need to instead do character recognition, optical character recognition. And you need to be looking at the parts, the characters that make up the object instead. That is what is important. Now, so going back to the dancing example, you need to be able to understand that the arms of the person are attached to the person and that their movement doesn't affect the overall movement of the person planted in the ground. Just like you need to be able to recognize that the parts of the branch are connected back to the tree and aren't going to run into the car. Now, you can expand this out to every other problem with self-driving. Being able to predict which way a car is going to go is the same thing. You don't need to know that it's a car. You just need to be able to look at the characters that make up the car and determine which way it's going. If it's going to move left or right, well, the tire of the car, it's going to turn. That's one thing to recognize. Also, the car itself is going to tip and lean. That's another character. The blinker, that's another character. The brake lights, that's another character. These are just characters that need to be recognized. It's not object recognition, it's character recognition. And in doing this, you should be able to recognize the different characters and then be able to plot out what space you're able to drive through and what space you can't drive through. And I think that part is pretty much solved. But then you have the other problem of predicting where something is going to move to. And this comes back to the character recognition. Because you look at all of the characters as a whole and recognize that they're an object. You don't have to know what the object is. You just have to know which the characters that make it up so that you can then predict which way it might move. Of course, sounds really easy to do. Probably isn't that easy, but this would be my theory and my approach for doing a self-driving car. If you want to know more, come ask.